My name is George Pantazis. I work for GRNet. It's the Greek Research Network. We are mainly a network service provider, not exactly an ISP. We actually provide network services to ISPs. During our work providing services to universities, mainly universities and all the Greek ISPs in Greece, we actually run the Greek Internet Exchange. We had the need to provide services like virtual machines. We originally started providing virtual machines using Xen, command line interfaces and stuff like that. Later, our customers required their own VMs. Other ISPs require VMs that we run for them, mainly for networking statistics and stuff like that, or routing, because we provided routing over software. And we started looking for a solution, a virtualization solution that would actually would be more than a VPS, a virtual private server. The idea was to have a cloud infrastructure as a service, cloud service, that we could provide to every university initially, NOC departments and operation centers, and maybe later to even students. So they could have their own VM, run any service they want, and have the required software and infrastructure. Originally, we researched every open source solution available right then, even some source closed solutions like VMware. Although the closed source solution was not an option for us, we needed an open source solution. Firstly, because we wanted to mess with it, change stuff inside it to make it work for us, to customize it. And also because GRNet is a fully open source platform. Everything in GRNet is open source except from the hardware, which is, of course, from either Cisco or no. So the idea was to investigate every cloud solution available, Eucalyptus, Nebula, OpenStack, find if we could use it and change it so we can use it. And we found a few issues. Anyway, the primary goals of GRNet was to be able to scale the infrastructure to as many thousands of users we needed and as many thousand VMs we needed in a very easy way. In a way that we could just get a new rack, position it in our data centers, and just add more computing power in our cloud infrastructure. The other part was that since we were going to provide services to end users, students of universities that are not technical, sociology or pharmacology and stuff like that, we required ease of use for the end user. The ability to create a VM and sustain the VM and update the VM using just his mouse and the web interface in a very, very easy way. Our other goal was not to use any custom solution from any hardware vendor. We did not want to have lock-ins. We wanted to be able to just say we need 2,000 cores and 4 terabytes of storage per node and get it from any vendor in the market. That included any proprietary APIs. So we couldn't use Cisco's proprietary API or any other network provider or storage provider. The other goal was many of the cloud solutions available then were not using persistent VMs. The idea was you create the VM, use it for a few hours, and then destroy it. In many solutions, like in Amazon, if you destroy your VM, if you stop your VM, it's destroyed. You have to start a new session and get a new VM that's going to be it's not going to be persistent. The idea was that each VM would have the option to be persistent, and the persistent option should be the default one. And lastly, we needed a very easy way and cheap way to maintain that, because we're a very small team. GRNet has a 4-team network operations center for the whole of Greece. All the universities in Greece get supported by those 4 people. So we needed a solution that these 4 people would just add a few hours per day for them and be able to manage and administrate the infrastructure. So during our evaluation of all the available OSS solutions right then, we had quite a few limitations. Most of them had sided with some manufacturers, and would use their APIs. So you had to buy the hardware, for example, a SAN. You needed the way to say to the SAN, to the storage area network, to create the user account. And you had to use that API to create a user account. Or the same for Juniper, for example, and another OSS solution. If you wanted to create VLANs and you wanted to get more than 4,096 VLANs, Juniper, you had to use the specific API that Juniper provided. So that meant if you wanted to use that OSS solution, that cloud solution, you needed to buy only Juniper equipment. GRNet uses any type of network equipment available in the world. And the most important issue we had was scalability. The thing is that in most solutions, you had a silo. You had the installation that you used the boot CD or over the net, created your installation, and that was that. If you wanted to add something, you had to do a new installation, add the clusters there, and start from the beginning and migrate users and stuff. Also, the user interface experience for end users was mostly a joke. In 2010, there wasn't actually any user interface for end users. If you want to do anything like user-specific flavor, you had to use the command line. And if it meant command line, it meant only Linux, you couldn't use Windows or something like that. And unfortunately, many of the projects, especially OpenStack, which was the most close to us, we liked OpenStack, we liked the idea, we liked the APIs and stuff, was extremely mature. You couldn't use it in a production environment. A lot of issues, bad design, especially on the logging and user management. It was all done in a MySQL table, and that was that. So, this is the Sinefo solution. Sinefo, by the way, means cloud in Greek. We have the ability. I'm going to do a demo. I'm going to start to try to make the introduction as swift as I can, so I can do a nice demo of the whole infrastructure. So a user in Sinefo can create either one VM or 2,000 VMs using only his mouse and doing actually 3 buttons. If he selects the same flavor, he can create as many VMs as he has in his quota. For example, we have users now that have 100 VMs quotas, so they can create 100 VMs using just their mouse. Yeah. It's 100% OSS. We use KVM as a hypervisor. We use Ganeti as the cluster manager. Ganeti is a Google project, and in this project, other than Google, GRNet is the largest code provider till now. And Sinefo, which is our cloud infrastructure, and the glue that connects the hypervisor, clustering, and everything else. In our solution, we do not require any specialized hardware. Right now, in our data center in Athens, our new data center in Athens, we use a SAN from a known provider. In the same time that we use disks that have been bought by a retailer in the center of Athens, just set up as a JBOD, just a bunch of disks, and they both work at the same time without any issues, and they both provide the same performance. We don't use any specific network solution to create our VLANs. We actually have our own solution of creating, I'm going to talk about it later, MAC prefixed VLANs. Over one VLAN, we can run as many VLANs as we want, so we don't have the usual limit of 2,000 VLANs or 4,000 VLANs or 60,000 VLANs of network providers. And we don't require any specific CPU. The only requirement is that we need to be able to run virtualization on it. We need virtualization extensions. And the most important part for us is drop-in scalability. The way we designed our data center is each rack has a top-of-the-rack switch, then it has its computing nodes, then it has its storage nodes, which is just servers with disks in it, and power, and that's it. The idea is, and it actually works like that since last year, we get an exact same rack without caring about the hardware in it. We just need a switch, any computing nodes. We don't care about cores. The new racks have more cores, of course, and more RAM. We don't care about anything, who made it, if it's Chinese or Taiwanese or anything. We just put it there, connected to the network, it boots, it's set up, and it works, and it immediately joins the cluster. So each rack setup, its own cluster. If you just connect it to our network, it's ready to be deployed, and it deploys VMs in that. We have a quite extensive way of balancing the nodes. So this is done automatically. If you can put a new rack, you immediately get every VM that needs to be migrated there and have a quality of VMs. It's done automatically out of, and all migrations are live. No user is required to do anything. Even the IPs are transferable without using any NAT. All IPs are routable directly from outside. So the idea is that each part of Sinefo should be a module. It's not a complete solution. It's not a silo. Each part of Sinefo can be exchanged because each part of Sinefo talks to each other part using an API. All of the modules have either a specific API designed for them because there wasn't an API before, or in case of the computing nodes, we use the OpenStack API. And the same for network, but only if the user decides to use NAT. And we use extensions over the OpenStack API. So if you have a client that talks OpenStack, it can talk to Sinefo. If you have a Sinefo client, it can talk to OpenStack. But it can do, of course, all the stuff that OpenStack doesn't support. The APIs, of course, are all open and very well documented. You can find them. I'm going to give you links later. So we also have the OpenStack API extensions that are free and open and already have been submitted to OpenStack if they want to use, if they get the features added and stuff like that, especially for the network, I think they're going to use it. And the only reason we're not compatible is fully compatible with OpenStack is we have features that are not there yet, especially the network part and the storage part. We use Rados, for example, mainly, or Archipelago. These parts are not yet existing in OpenStack, but obviously, because they've seen the Sinefo, they may use them later for their own. So the main modules of Sinefo are Astakos, which is the authentication service, the identification authentication service. GRNet has a federated authentication service based on Shibboleth. GRNet is the main provider for that federation, is the main provider of that federation, and every university in Greece or public sector company or, of course, private sector companies like Microsoft, when they need to authenticate a student, they use Shibboleth. MSDN, MSDNA, and stuff like that in Greece are only available through Shibboleth. And Astakos is a proxy, if we want to say a proxy, that provides many authentication modules for the Shibboleth federated authentication structure. Then we have an object store that's actually the only storage solution that Sinefo is using. It's using an open object storage solution that's similar to Amazon's S3. And that's the only storage solution that we use. We don't care what's underneath. You can have NFS. You just, in order to use actually Pythos, you just need to mount something on a directory and say that this is my root for Pythos, and that's the only storage solution that you require. The idea is that we use the same idea. We use objects. Each file that's getting uploaded in Pythos, it's separated in 4 megabytes blocks. Each block is hashed. A hash map tree is created, and we use this hash map tree to create directories. That's where we store the blocks. And this way we have full deduplication. Every 4 megabyte block is not going to be stored or uploaded again, only if it changes or it's deleted from all users. The idea is that since all our clients that speak Pythos, and not the OpenStack, not Suite, have the ability to skip blocks while uploading data. So if another user uploaded a 5 gigabyte file, and I start to upload the same 5 gigabyte file, it's going to finish in 2 seconds because it's only going to check that this hash map is already there, so there's no reason to upload it. Or just updated blocks. If I have different blocks in my file, I'm going to update only the different blocks. Pythos is also the storage service for our image service. all images, which is called Plankton, all images, VM images, the templates or clones or expansions are all stored in Pythos in the same way. So if I have multiple versions of the same image, I'm only storing the different parts of that blocks. For example, since we update our images, we store all images always at the same time. Only the changed blocks are stored there. If a new version, we have OpenSUSE 12.3 images since Tuesday. If we upload 12.4 and the first 2 gigs are the same, the image is going to store only the changes. It's also our volume service, our disks. It's called the volume service called Archipelago. It's still using Pythos. Each image we are using actually a hybrid solution. We use local storage, and in that local storage we actually keep the copy and write changes, and we have the original image, original disk on Pythos, and we then sync any changes to that image. And Pythos by default is doing versioning. So any file you upload, it's always versioned. You can get up to any older version of your file. You just can request by date or by hash any file you have stored before, or the same file, any changes or the file itself. Since we don't store the whole file, we only store the changes. We have hash maps. Each time the hash map 3 changes, we just store the new version. And we can just request the oldest blocks that are missing from this version. So you can have a full history of your file forever. That consumes storage though, and we only give 50 gigabytes of storage per user for now. So, and then it's our compute and network module. It's called Kyklades, and there is a reason that compute and network is together actually. I'm going to start the next one. Okay, so Kyklades. Kyklades is a very thin layer over Ganeti. Ganeti is the tool that Google uses to provide clusters to its developers and for testing or developing. The idea is that each cluster is usually a small cluster of 15 or 20 nodes, and each user has its own access to that cluster. Since GRNet were using Ganeti before going to its own solution, we decided to use that because it's tested. Google is actually using Ganeti in every installation they have for the at least last 5 years. It's the default solution for everything. We had the full access to the code. It's open source, and most importantly, Google liked that we provided code and changes to them because they wanted that changes. So we have a very a very good cooperation with them. So Kyklades has actually almost everything except from the native clients for the users. Everything is written in Python and Django, except for parts, of course, of the kernel modules for the Archipelago, which is on C++. So the issue that Ganeti would have as a cloud solution is that it's designed to be a single user cluster. One user has access to that cluster. What Kyklades does is it changes that, and it actually uses as many clusters as you need by as many users as you need. That's the only multiplexing that's done, actually. So Kyklades is the thing that knows which VM belongs to which user and which user has which rights. And it only has the rules, of course, Astakos knows the exact owners. And that's the thin layer over Ganeti. We can support a limitless amount of Ganeti clusters. There is no limit, actually, on how many clusters we can add. And with each cluster, you just add more computing nodes and storage in your stack. And we use OpenStack Compute API 1.1 to control it. As extra features, we have a full physical remote console, physical as in, it's an actual console over KVM that we transfer to the end user. We provide the Java interface for the end user on the web, and they have full access as if they were in there and had the KVM on our data center. And since Kyklades knows the status and knows the image, you can't just put an ISO in Kyklades and boot it. It's not a VPS service. Kyklades has to know about the image and how it works. the VM is aware of Kyklades, and we have full control of the VM. We can shut it down, reboot it, restart the network, or anything we need, and get full real-time statistics, I'm going to show you later, of the VM while it's running, and without having to pull the plug, for example, to shut it down. If we want to shut down the VM, we're going to issue an ACPI command and say, now the power button is pressed. Shut down gracefully. You can, of course, do it ungracefully if you want, but it's not, yeah. So, networking. GRNet since 1999, I think, it's dual stack. It's IPv4 and IPv6. We mainly, GRNet in its core is using only IPv6 for quite a lot of years now. But we provide a dual stack solution for our public interfaces. Each VM has one IPv4 and one IPv6 for now. The idea is that sometime, I hope later next year, we're going to only provide IPv6 and people are going to have IPv6 network IPs. So we provide a complete network isolation per VM. So each VM, although it's in the same host, in the name network, it doesn't have any way of connecting to any other VM. It's completely independent. That's done in each host, and each host completely controls the communication between VMs, so you don't have any way of accessing a VM without your knowledge. For this reason, we provide private networks in order to provide connectivity between the VMs directly. Private networks can have public IPs. We do not provide public IPs. We provide private ranges, which you can set up on any range you want. I mean, in our production, you can put public IPs. You have the network routed by us. And what we do actually is we add a new network card in the VM, in KVM. We reboot the machine, and we get a new card with that LAN that's routed only between the VMs that are on that VLAN. We call it a VLAN. That's using VLANs and MAC prefixes. So the host is taking each MAC address, which is put on each VM by us. You can't change it. There is no way to change it. Each VM always has the same the MAC address we provided, and we use a prefix. This prefix is the addressing rules for your VMs. So if you have two VMs and put them in the same private network, they're going to be able to talk only to each other, because they only are going to see only that subnet. So we also support multiple physical VLANs. That's an issue for any networking provider for now. Even with their custom solutions, they have always a limit of VLANs. That's obvious because they don't have enough memory to keep all the VLANs in the routers. And we don't use any vendor-specific features. Anything that is not going to work on a Netgear switch and router at your home is not going to be supported by us. If we have to use a feature that's more advanced, we write it and we do it on software. So the storage, as I said before, each file or image or volume you have on your Pithos storage is actually 4 megabyte blocks. It's content-based addressing. So as I said before, we have a hash map tree that has a series of hash maps. Each hash map is a file stored in a folder that's under that hash map on the file system, and that's the way we create a file. For example, if you request a file from Pithos, you're not going to request a file name, actually. You're going to request a hash map, a value of SHA 256 hashes. That's how we know how to make the file for you, because each time you request a hash map, we recreate the file for you. Actually, a stream opens over HTTP, and we send in series. If you are using just HTTP, you're getting in series the chunks. If you are using Pithos itself, you can get them in any order you want. So this allows for partial file transfers of calls. You can, for now, only the Windows client can do that, but we expect the rest to follow. You can choose which parts of your file are going to be transferred by which client. So you have two clients with the same files, and say between them it's a peer-to-peer way of talking, and say, please, both of you upload the same file, and they're going to upload the chunks that they need to upload, so you're going to have more bandwidth. It's a very, very fast way of checking for alterations, especially for anything that's larger than 4 blocks, 16 megabytes. That's going to be extremely faster because you don't have to actually check the whole file, only the alterations, the blocks that are changed. And of course, we do the duplication as I said before. So syncing actually with Pythos on anything that's over 16 megabytes, it's extremely cheap. We don't use bandwidth almost at all, especially for updates. We don't, the maximum upload you're going to get is a 4 megabyte file. And as I said before, of course, we don't care about the storage solution. We need a path in the server that's running Pythos, and we'll just say to Pythos, that's your storage. Pythos is going to care about rate limiting and everything required to share that files, those blocks. And of course, it's the only way that you can store files, VMs, and volumes in Sinefo. Okay, end. Good. So I'm going to show you our production. Okay, Sinefo is the platform. Okeanos is the production use of that platform. It's installed. We have 14,000 VMs actively running right now. I think about 3,500 users, actual users. We have the numbers, the exact numbers, if you want, on our site, and we'll give links later. And that's a very, very small installation. Actually, it's just a part of our data center. It's only 100 nodes, completely with computing, storage, and caching nodes with SSDs. So a user is going to log in the user interface, and it's going to be presented with his VMs. You get a status of its VM, and if it has an issue, you're going to see some lights here. It's IPv4, IPv6, and the actions that he can do. I'm going to create a new VM with OpenSUSE. By the way, the standard storage, if you want to try it later, we have a full demo platform that you can join, but you can only have your VM